specifically, I was born into a white middle-class family, which means that I was born with a certain sense of social currency, meaning that on my day-to-day life, I don't really feel alien. I have the privilege of feeling pretty in most of the time. That said, regardless of who we are, I'm sure we've all had a time where we feel other, right? Where we feel alien. So most of the time that really sucks, but there was one time that this happened to me and it sucked a little bit less. First of all, there's a couple things about me you guys should know. I am short, I'm loud, I'm rude sometimes, but I really love people, so I'm not that rude. I'm really funny, I'm smart, I'm confrontational. I used to teach sex ed for Planned Parenthood, which makes me a child of Satan, and a liberal, which is the same thing. And a couple other things about me. I hate gorgonzola cheese and I love pumpkin spice. So now that we've covered me, my partner Isaiah has a childhood friend, and we're gonna call her Alice because she looks like an Alice, but her name isn't Alice. And a couple things about her is that she is the antithesis of me. She is tall, she is thin, she is also smart. She might be funny, but I've never heard it because she's really shy and introverted and doesn't like people that much, which is totally fine. And we both are badass women living our lives, but we're doing it in two separate worlds. So one day Alice got married and we were invited. I say we, Isaiah was invited and I was his +1, so I got to go. And that was really exciting for me because I love weddings. They have great music, you get to dance, there's always amazing food, and I love love. So we went to this wedding and it was not that. It was very heteronormative. They said man and woman like 6 times. We're like, we get it, guys, thank you. They also had no music. I didn't get to dance. The food all had meat in it, and I'm a vegetarian, which is fine. But I was sad. And I felt really other there. I didn't really fit in at all. To be fair, I kind of sabotaged myself a little bit. So I was planning on wearing this black wrap dress. It was long sleeved, and a wrap dress is just 2 pieces of cloth that go whoop. So it's really low cut on the front and it has a slit on the side. And that doesn't work when you're going to a church in Custer to a wedding. So I wasn't gonna wear that, which is fine. So I went to Forever 21 like any reasonable woman would. And when I was there, I found a dress that would have been perfect. It had like long sleeves, it was like loose, and it was high cut, and it had flowers on it. And it was in my price range. And right next to that dress was a black wrap dress that was short sleeved. And summer was coming. So I needed to prepare for summer, and I'm really practical, so I bought the wrap dress that looked exactly like my other dress, and I wore that to the wedding. I not only wore a ridiculous wrap dress to a wedding in Custer, but I also tried fake eyelashes for the first time. Those of you who have ever worn fake eyelashes, and some of you who have not, are laughing because fake eyelashes are fucking dumb. And they're really hard to put on. And so one of them was on my eye, like it should be, and the other one was in the middle of my eyelid because I'm a damn mess. So I walk into this wedding, and I'm wearing a wrap dress, and I'm wearing an eyelash in the middle of my eyelid. And I'm there for 2 hours. And everything's heteronormative and has meat in it. And Alice is there. And Alice is there, and she sees me walk in, and I know that I didn't matter in that moment. And in retrospect, I'm so self-centered that I thought that my presence pissed her off, and it totally didn't. But I thought when she saw me that she was like, oh no, it's the child of Satan. And so we did it, we went through the 2 hours, and on a serious note, like, even though I looked ridiculous, and that is hilarious, I was sitting at the table in the reception, and I remember thinking, like, I don't belong here. I look like an asshole. And I am with the love of my life, and I feel like I am taking him away from this home and this world that he grew up in that is so clean and really beautiful, just not from my perspective. And I can totally respect that. And my presence and me as a person is kind of bringing him away from something that he's always known, that has been really wonderful and has nurtured him. And that was really, really difficult. to feel. And it was kind of the worst type of other, because it didn't just affect me. I felt like it was affecting the person that I really loved. So we get in the car after 2 hours of idiocracy, and we sit down in the car. We both take a collective sigh because it was awful. And we look at each other, and he looks at me and he goes, "You look so pretty." Oh. And I was like, "What? What the fuck is wrong with you?" Because I'm rude. And he looked at me again and he said, "You look so pretty." And he meant it. And that's when I realized, like, why try? Just be stupid. Just look stupid. In any given situation, it's awesome. And you know what? I'm a beautiful alien.
Yes.
Thank you.
I always tell the story of my niece Lily's birth in just about the same way. It goes something like, after an hour or so of pushing, maybe more, maybe less, I don't know, Shannon will remember, you can kind of see this patch of black hair on a gray skull emerging from my sister Shannon's vagina, right? And the midwife's down there with her flashlight, and she reaches down and she grabs a hold, and out shakes this like slimy, purpley gray alien creature, like shrieking, still attached to the inside of my sister's body with like this cord made of body. That's just like in the movies. Like. It's an image that has stayed with me. The part that I don't tell in that story is the part about how much I had drank the night before. Which is, they laughed last time I said that too, which is funny because I didn't think anyone was going to laugh at that. It's about maybe a bottle and a half of wine, which at that point for me wasn't that much. And, it's white wine, so. A bottle of white wine, as I'm sure you drinkers know. When the call came that Shannon was in labor, they had a hard time waking me up. I'm a very deep sleeper in those days. My dad did not want to let me drive off into the buggy with the island warning to go to the birth center. He wanted to drive me, but eventually he let me go. And after a couple of cigarettes and a long drive down the island with the windows down, I got to the birth center full of adrenaline, ready to go photograph the birth and whatever was going to happen. And then we had a human. It was our first one. And it became clear immediately that she was going to learn everything from watching and mimicking us. And we were going to have to behave accordingly and speak accordingly. It was our job to create the world that this child was going to live in for reality. And over our lives, Shannon and I have had lots of late night drunken conversations about our own childhood and the adult role models we had and the struggles of our parents and how their failings shaped our lives. And don't get me wrong, I didn't have a bad childhood. It was a very good childhood, but we were raised by two people who didn't really have a lot of time for us, or they didn't maybe understand how to make time. They were both really unhappy. My mom was a single mother, I guess, 3 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment. I think that they meant well, but life hadn't really turned out the way they thought it was going to, and having children was harder than they thought it was going to be. They didn't really have a support system, either of them, separately. And they never figured out how to come out of their day-to-day lives and show up for us as kids, really. And I realized that we had this opportunity to do differently by this person, to create a different kind of world for her and make a choice. What's important? What do we want her to learn? I went on this journey of trying to figure out what it was that I thought was important. How do I think adults should be? What do I think that are the memories I want her to have. And, you know, some of the things were really obvious, like raising a woman with a good body image, which meant always pulling up my shirt to show my belly button, no matter where we were or who was around, and never criticizing my own body or anyone else's. Relearning cursive. I'm not teaching it in schools anymore, and I wanted her to know. And, you know, the little things like road trips and camping and swimming in the lakes and going to the water slides and Easter eggs and Christmas cookies and all the stuff that, you know, is hard and expensive and time consuming and actually not really all that much fun. But that's what you do. Raising a child, and that's what we're doing. And it's a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week job to raise a child. You can't do it alone. Well, you can't do it alone well. I wonder how many adults would be the right number for each child. You know, would it be 4 or 6? Can you imagine if we as a society were raising children at a 6-to-1 ratio? How many aunties and uncles and parents and teachers and neighbors that had shown up for kids? Letting kids be kids. I spent my 20s thinking that having children would be what would save me from drinking. I knew even then, you know, I would partner up, have a bunch of kids, and that would curtail what I knew was a growing problem. Instead, I saved myself, and what I can see now is that in this world, you know, where there's always a new distraction, new puppy, new baby, new iPhone, and the world just shoots by us at lightning speed, we have only a finite amount of energy and time. And the busier you are, the more thinly it's spread, like you don't get more. And I have the option, you know, instead of having more and more children, I can use my energy helping to take better care of the children that I raise.
Strange visitor from another planet, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, bulletproof and stuff, I forget the rest. Something about a locomotive. I was never really a Superman guy, though I love almost every superhero, and I have spent more time reading superhero comic books than I should admit to anyone. But one of the things I like about Superman was the way that his powers come from his differences. So, spoiler alert, he's not from Earth. He's from this other planet, and on this other planet, there's a red sun, and Earth planet is a yellow sun, as you might know. And somehow his red planet biology under the yellow sun makes him fly and stuff. Don't worry about it. As I said, I've read a lot of superhero comics. A lot of them I read by the time I was like 8 years old. When I was 8 years old, I was moving to a new state and a new school. And I can remember walking in on the first day of 3rd grade and kind of surveying the classroom and hoping that in this room I would find some friends. I was excited about the notion of having friends, of making friends in the 3rd grade, in part because I had just moved away from the people I knew, but also because of what my family was like when I was growing up. I think at best you'd say they didn't really know what to do with me as the kind of kid I was. At worst, maybe they were kind of too wrapped up in processing or not processing their own trauma to have that kind of space for an 8-year-old. But I walked in, well, I should say, so consequently, when I was looking for that kind of connection, when I was looking for that kind of, I don't know, relationship or that kind of power in my life, I spent a lot of time reading superhero comics and thinking about superheroes. And by the time I walked into 3rd grade, I had a lot of ideas about the best and worst superpowers to have. I met my buddy Graham because he was in the same row as me, and we did this thing where you got to know the people in your row. Thank God Graham was in my row. I don't know if I would have made it without that. I met Jeff because he was in the same class as me, and when people found out that I read a lot of books, they were like, "Oh, Jeff reads a lot of books." You guys remember when you could be friends with people just because you both read a lot of books? I'm trying to make friends now as a 30-something-year-old in Bellingham, and that doesn't always work. Like, I can't just stop people on the bus and be like, "I read books too." My buddy Adam lived on the same street as me. That also doesn't really work. Can't just like stop somebody coming out of my apartment building and be like, "We live on the same street, let's play." But in 3rd grade that worked, and so the 4 of us started a superhero team. And I don't know how much you remember from 3rd grade. I'm sure I learned some important stuff about reading or history or something. But the day built and was organized around, and kind of the only thing that mattered about school was that part of school, the most important part of school, the only thing that mattered in my young life was, of course, recess. And the 4 of us would go out into the field and play superheroes. And Graham had this kind of like, we had all the like major archetypes covered. Graham had this like fighting robot dude, and Jeff was like kind of a like boy genius type, and I could like, you know, weave sun rays into sticks and rope and stuff. Don't worry about it. It's a great power, shut up. And Adam was my favorite because, you know, we would talk about like who would win in a fight. He decided that he was made of a rubber band. If he was like a rubber band man, he would be invincible. Because if you hit it, you would bounce off, and if you like shot him with a bullet, it would bounce off. And we were like, "Oh, Adam, but what if we shoot you with a laser?" Because as you know, lasers can break a rubber band and nothing else can. I don't know if we have any physicists in the audience, but if you could just... And that's when Adam came up with the greatest superhero in the history of the world, and became, from that day forward, Rubber Band Mirror Man. So good. And we spent a lot of time thinking about superpowers, and whenever I made a new friend, I would kind of say, like, "So what kind of superhero do you want to be when you play with us?" And some of them had really good ideas, some of them not so much, but we would be out in the field and we'd be fighting bad guys, and giant robots would attack, and we fought terrorists before it was cool. You know, back when terrorists didn't really mean anything to me outside of comic books, because it was before little white boys in America had to worry about that kind of thing, I guess. One time, so we would go out in the field to fight our battles. That was our away missions. We would take hang gliders there. We were really into hang gliders for some reason. Again, don't worry about it. Hang gliders are cool though. Yeah. But we met in, there's like a little platform where you would stand on to do the monkey bars, to start the monkey bars, and we would meet under there. And that was our superhero hideout, right? And that was on kind of this one section of the playground. And the school administrators at one point decided that that section of the playground should be for the younger kids. And I was in like, 5th grade at this time. I was a senior in high school at this point. And it was a problem that that section of the high school was only... It was a problem that that section of the playground was only for the smaller children, because of course that's where our superhero headquarters were. So me and Graham and Adam and Jeff, without necessarily telling anyone that's where our headquarters were, arranged a nonviolent peaceful protest at recess that day, and together we marched around that section of gravel playground. In my mind, it was like hundreds of us for hours. But 2 days later, the big kids got to go back to that playground ever since I have been involved in the work of social justice. I'm not saying that was important for me. It was. Another time, when we were getting a little older, like 5th or 6th grade, my buddy Graham decided that he wanted to go play kickball. He was kind of interested in making, I guess the way to say it would be cooler friends. He's kind of interested in like maybe there were like girls who played kickball, which was a thing. And so at this point he was playing a character named Moonbeam. Don't worry about it. And he was over playing kickball and we were on an adventure out in the field fighting invisible bad guys. When, as so often happens in these kind of narratives, we were captured by a supervillain and put into a trap that only Moonbeam could save us from. And of course, Graham was over playing kickball. So what could we do? Tell you what we did. We sent our astral forms. As you may know, when you're pretending to send your astral form across the playground, what you do is... And we came over, and we were like, Moonbeam! Moonbeam! You need to rescue us! Graham was there, playing kickball with the cool kids. And we said, Moonbeam! And Graham, in that moment, forever gave up any chance of hanging out with the cool kids. And came and rescued us. Right? Solid dude. As we got older, we didn't play as much. They don't give you recess in high school, which is fucking bullshit. But we still would tell stories sometimes, or like write stories about our superhero teams. There's a whole arc. It's a little like 90s gritty tragic. I'm not going to go into it.
Maybe
After. But that was a really important time in my life, and the way I met some important people, and I kind of try people out by kind of saying like, well, what's your superpower? What do you want to be when we play superheroes together? So much so that when I was in college, I was getting to know this person who I'm now married to. And I remember on one of our hey, we kind of like each other, we're like getting to know each other, kind of like, not really a date, but we're like in line for sandwiches together. You know those? Yeah. And she was telling me all about her family and her growing up years and her church and stuff like that, all these things that were important to her, her music. She was like, so what about you? What's your deal? You know? I don't think that's how she said it. And I thought about it. I was like, should I talk about my church, or like how much I love the woods, or like what's really important to me? Should I talk about kind of my spirituality? And as I was waiting for my sandwich, I just turned to her and I started, and I was like, so I used to be a superhero. And for a while, that's kind of where this story wrapped up, because that's just about like this important time in my life, this important, this way that this imaginative thing, this thing that came from reading comic books on the floor before school in the morning, grew into like getting to know friends who continue to be important to me. But I was thinking about this lately, and I was thinking about what my life is like these days. I don't know about y'all, but like there's some shit going down in the world, and like it's not invisible bad guys that you can go out in the field behind the elementary school and punch. And like I don't really feel equipped to do things about climate change or fascists or any of a number of things, right? So instead what I do is I go around and I meet as many people as I can, and I find out what they care about, and I find out what they're good at. And honestly, it's the kind of thing with like Superman where like they grew up in this way that's a little weird, and that makes them really good at something. Or they grew up queer, and so they know what it's like to welcome people. They grew up with a disability, and so they know what it's like to be marginalized. They grew up just thinking in a different way, and so they have better and different ideas than the rest of us do, right? And I go out for a beer with people, or I go out for a coffee with people, and I find out about that and try to, connect those people or get them involved or run after them as they do awesome things. It's kind of my whole jam these days, and what I realize is it's a little bit like what I do all day, every day, is walk up to people and be like, hey, I'm David, what's your superpower? Hey, I'm David, what's your superpower? Hey, I'm David, what's your superpower?
A few years and a few weeks ago, right around the fall equinox, I found myself coming down the steps of the Great Wall of China. Yeah. Like you do. I was traveling with a group of storytellers from North America. We were on this citizen diplomacy storyteller exchange in China. But before we got down to the serious business of cultural exchange, we were taking a week to be flat out tourists. I will say that traveling as a tourist with storytellers is an amazing thing because, like the night before, Linda Fong, who was a native of Beijing before she immigrated to the US, would tell us stories of like all the people who worked and died to make the Great Wall of China, or we'd go to the Forbidden City and then we'd see this well and we'd like, that's the well where the maple was shoved down in, and it just enriched the experience. So I spent the whole time just in this absolute daze. And my best friend Alton, who's a storyteller from Vancouver, Washington, and I would several times a day just turn to each other and go, we're in China! This is the Great Wall of China, which for me and my cane was more difficult than I had anticipated for a couple of reasons. Now, one reason was just the environment itself. It's kind of hard to tell from the pictures, but the steps where the Great Wall of China is steep, they're like this high. They're not like the steps in your house or in a public building. It's climbing up and climbing down. And it was about 130 degrees, and the wall is made out of really dark, almost black stone. So it's incredibly hot and incredibly sticky. Also, around the fall equinox is the second biggest countrywide vacation time in China. So for this 1 week, foreign tourists were in the vast minority. The wall was filled with tourists who had come from all around China. So I had that wonderful experience of feeling entirely alien, which I think every white boy from the US really needs to feel every now and then. I also felt tall occasionally, which was new for me. And it gave me a chance to brush up on my really pathetic Mandarin. I took 3 years of Mandarin and 1 year in graduate school, and then did nothing with it for 9 years. But I was getting a little bit of it back, enough so that I could make my way around a restaurant or possibly get arrested if I didn't use the right word. But nonetheless, here Alton and I were coming down these incredibly steep steps on a really hot day, just totally blown out of our minds. This was the Great Wall of China. And we made it down to a flat part, and we were leaning up against the outside rail, trying to catch our breath. And this voice in English said, would you mind taking our picture? Nice sort of clipped British accent, the kind I really love. And we looked up, and there was a gentleman there in his mid-50s with his wife and teenage daughter. And so we said, sure, and we were probably the only non-Chinese in that whole section of the wall. So it was nice that we could do, something in English briefly. But I found out after we exchanged picture-taking sessions that the man was a physicist professor from Tehran, Iran. And his wife was also a professor there of English, of all things. Their daughter also spoke good English. And we had a nice conversation, just standing there in a sea of black hair going back and forth beside us. And times at that point between the government of Iran and the government of the United States were tense. This is when the US government was accusing Iran of trying to create a nuclear weapons program, which has come around back in the news now. And Iran was accusing the US of trying to stop their legitimate nuclear power dreams. And so there was a lot of crap flowing back and forth in the media between the two countries. And yet we had this really beautiful, personable, amiable discussion there. And at one point, the professor said, you know, you guys don't look like demons at all. What? He's like, yeah, well, you know, our government would have us believe that if we ever met an American in person, they'd have horns and a tail and breathe fire. And I said, well, yeah, I get that. But to be honest, if you listen to our government, you know, you're a physicist from Iran, you should be glowing green. And there was a pause, and he smiled this great big grin, and he means, you like, you know, like from a giant burst of gamma radiation? You know, like the Hulk? And he's like, the Hulk? He's like, yeah, you know, David Banner, the Hulk. Right there on the Great Wall of China. Can you believe that he traveled like 3,500 miles, and Alton and I had come 5,500 miles so that we could meet on the Great Wall of China and go to each other. And it felt, you know, we're really bonded here. We're both human. And then something else happened that really let me know that people are people all around the world. Because his teenage daughter looked at us and went, ugh. It was like the eye roll and everything. Nerd. Which is exactly what my now 16-year-old daughter does to me. So, we had that moment there, being both completely alien and completely the same. It was wonderful, and it was separate from our regular world and our lives. And normally that would have been the end of the story, and it would have been good enough for any story. But you see, we were doing the tourist thing for a week. So every day for that week, we would run into them again. Or see them like across the courtyard at the Summer Palace. Or, you know, it's obligatory if you're actually on a tourist tour that they take you to the government-owned stores. There's the Jade Shop, there's the Pearl Shop, and the one with silks, and the one with carpets. You have to stop. So even if you're going to see the Ming Tomb, you have to stop at the Pearl Stop, which is pretty close by. And always there was the professor and the professor and the... And so we had this little thing going. And you never knew where you were going to bump into them, but whenever we did see them, we go... And it made that trip entirely a different thing for us, because you never knew where, you know, I wouldn't even see him. I'd be looking, it's like, I cannot afford anything here, even at the exchange rate, and then I hear this... But we were at the Sacred Way, which is this amazing row of trees and these giant animal statues that goes for probably half a mile. It's incredible because it's really massive in scale, and yet the weight of it isn't the stone or the scale or the size, it's the weight of the time. And there was the professor and their daughter, and we did our little thing occasionally, but every time we did that and we chuckled a little bit, I was starting to hear these Chinese Mandarin words that I kind of knew and I kind of didn't. So I went to my walking Chinese dictionary, Peter. And Peter was our lifesaver. Peter was our translator, he was our fixer, he was the guy who could talk to the bus driver and say, what the hell are you doing? That's not safe. Peter knew everything, and he was our absolute savior. Peter also knew that my handle on Mandarin was sketchy at best, and that I would overreach frequently. So I came to Peter and I said, okay, Peter, there's this phrase I've heard twice now, or at least parts of it, and I'm not sure what it is. Can you help me parse it out? Like, sure, hit me with it. So I said, well, the first part I get, it's Fong Zhuang, Wai Wo. And it's like, that's something like crazy foreigner or something like that. It's like, yeah, that's right. Hong Kong, the Wai Wo is Wai Wo Ren. That's crazy foreigner. It's like, okay, well, I figured that, and just me walking around here matches that. But then there's this other part, is Tamen Ren Wei, Tamen Lu Ju Ren. What's this Lu Ju Ren thing? And the other one is like they something something. And he looked at me and got really serious, which Peter never does. And he says, what have you been doing in my country? What? He's like, okay, you gotta tell me what you're doing to get this phrase. And now I'm worried. It's like, holy crap, what did I do? Because you gotta kind of watch your step. You don't want to go marching around saying, down these Chinese and their incursion to Tibet. That's it. Now, I wouldn't go to jail, but Peter would go to jail if he was leading me around. And I'm like, what did I do? And wouldn't you know it, as Peter and I were talking, I hear this in the background. I'm like, talking. But I was ignoring him. So the professor came around and looked at me and he went, and it would be rude, right? So I said, excuse me, Peter. And Peter went, oh. You see, that whole phrase means crazy foreigners think they're the Hulk. And just as that revelation comes through, I hear,
not like the others. We did not belong where we were. We were strangers in a strange land. Aliens. We weren't extraterrestrials. And we hadn't sneaked across the border and entered the country illegally. No. It was worse than that. We were hippies. In October of 1970, we moved to a small community in the mountains, the Cascade Mountains. It's off the Stevens Pass Highway. It's called Index, Washington. It's a latitude off the road. And the cabin was 5 miles up that road in the wilderness. We was me, my girlfriend Mary, Chip, and his girlfriend Kathy. We financed this move by the money that Chip and I had earned fighting forest fires in a long, grueling, and dangerous and crazy summer over near Wenatchee. But hey, that's a different story. This road that we were on goes up to a place called Garland Mineral Springs. It was a resort in the 30s when Index was in its heyday. That was around the turn of the 20th century up into the 20s. There were about 600 people living in Index then. Well, what happened to the resort was there was a mudslide that covered the spring and then the big hotel burned down, and that was the end of the resort. So, I had met through a mutual friend 2 people in Index. And when we got the last firefighting money, the last checks came in, we cashed them, we bought a flathead Ford pickup, half-ton, bright red, and off we went to Index. The 2 people I knew there was Jackie who was an attractive middle-aged woman with 3 kids, and Lou, who was the deputy sheriff. The deputy sheriff was not a paid job in Index, Washington. So Lou made his money cutting firewood, and he knew somebody that had a cabin that wasn't in use, and we went and looked at the cabin. It was real solid, had 2 bedrooms, a nice wood cook stove in the kitchen, and a great little Franklin stove in the living room. Nice tight cabin right next to the river. So, I have to remember what kind of time this was. It's 1970. The Vietnam War is raging on, seemingly without end. Nixon was president in his first term. There were riots, race riots, there were anti-war protests that turned into police riots, there was tear gas, there was beatings, there was all kinds of stuff going on, and we were thrilled to get out of Seattle. Both Chip and I had been having this running argument, separate arguments, with our uncle. Our uncle thought that we should be soldiers. And we both of us won that argument. And so that was over. And we had all 4 of us been active in the anti-war movement. You know, the whole power to the people thing. Stick it to the man. But we were burned out. It was just too much. And you know how when you're young, when you're really young, you can look at something and see what you want to see, and you can believe the most amazing shit. It just isn't true. Okay? So what we believed was that all the problems that we had came from living in the city. So it was all this, yeah, man, let's get back to the land. No cops, no government, no traffic, no pollution, yeah. Like that, and it's also like no running water. No electricity, no indoor plumbing. You haven't lived until you've gone out to take a crap at night through 2 feet of fresh snow in an outhouse that's not heated. To top it off, all 4 of us were city kids. Not one of us had ever lived anywhere near a farm or in the country, and certainly not in the mountains. Now that was one tough winter living in that cabin, let me tell you. But that's another story. So, and let me tell you a little bit about Index. Index, you know, I told you it's like a mining and logging town that went bust but never quite died. And there's railroad tracks that run right down the middle of the town, north and south. Great Northern Railway. On the east side of the tracks is the old part of town. And the houses were pretty much built in the 1900s and the teens and the 1920s. They're substantial homes because there was plenty of timber. And the people that were living in those houses were middle-aged to elderly, substantial people. A lot of them had been there most of their lives. Some of them were even born in Index. There's a tavern, there's a post office, there's a general store, fire department, city hall, there's a park, there's a school, there's a hotel that had been converted to apartments, and there were a bunch of elderly people living there. And there was a social hall, and I am not making this up. The social hall was called the Red Men Lodge. So that's the kind of thing that was going on that side of the tracks. Now on the other side of the tracks was the poor side of town. The houses there had been kind of thrown up, mostly in the 30s through the 50s, some in the 60s, cheaply made. Some of them were little more than shacks. And the bulk of the population lived over there. There were about 50 people on the west side. There were maybe 80 to 100 on the west side. Now, most of those people, there were a couple of families in there, but most of them were women with children. And pretty much everybody on that side of town either had some kind of legal difficulty they were hiding out from, or were escaping a bad relationship. So that's index. Now what we didn't know when we moved up there was that just before we moved in, there had been a major cocaine ring broken up. About 15 miles up the Stevens Pass Highway from where we were. And between that and the media pounding it into everybody's head about the danger of hippies, we were not particularly welcome in that town. Lou and Jackie were cordial to us, but other people would cross the street to get away from us. Like, we could go in the tavern and we could buy beer to go, but they didn't want us sitting around drinking it. We'd go in the general store, which was run by this 80-year-old couple, Schnitz and Mrs. Schnitz, and they would follow us around like this, because they were sure that we were going to steal something. Now, their daughter, their adult daughter, who was about probably 50 years old, was Lucy, and she was the postmistress. And she was curt to the point of rudeness when we had mail business. But the best was Earl, the sheriff. Now the reason they had a deputy sheriff was because they really couldn't trust Earl to do any sheriffing. Because Earl had been sheriff since like the 30s. He was 90 years old. And I am not making this up, he still wore a gun belt with a Colt 45 revolver on it. And when we would come to town, he would stagger out of the tavern and do this. And if we were going to someplace where he could see us and watch the truck, we'd come out, he'd still be standing there waiting. And he'd watch us leave. And if we were going somewhere else in town, he'd drag a chair out and get himself a beer and come out there and sit to make sure that we got out of town. So that was the atmosphere we had, and we didn't really care if people liked us. We weren't there to make people like us. But you know, you figure when you have an atmosphere like that, things can happen. We'll get to that. So we moved up to the cabin and we figured we were set now. And do you guys know, did you know that it snows in the mountains? I mean, you know, I had skied, I was a Boy Scout, we did winter camps. We'd go somewhere and go sledding, you know. But you go to the snow and then you leave the snow and you go home and you take a hot shower and you get into bed and you're all good. Well, we suddenly realized it started snowing in the middle of October. Just kind of a dusting, and all of a sudden we thought, oh, we don't have any firewood. So we went to Lou and we said, hey, we need to borrow your truck and your chainsaw if we could. So, well, he made a deal. It was like, you can go and cut all the firewood you want, but when you return your truck, it has to have a cord of wood in it. Well, all right, so we cut a lot of firewood. So there's a snowplow that would clear the road. That wasn't an issue. It didn't go all the way to Garland. And there had been some Christian youth group that had been camping out up at Garland. And we figured when the snow came, they would be gone. But one day we got in the pickup and we're going to go down to town and get Lou's truck and go cut some firewood. And the road's been plowed, so it's all good. We get out of the driveway and here's a guy hitchhiking towards town. So we stop and get him in the truck, and his name is Al, and he says he was visiting his brother up at Garland Mineral Springs. And we're like, there's still people up at Garland? Well, what are they doing? It's winter. He's like, oh, they've got chickens and ducks and geese and rabbits, and they've got all this food, and they're set. Who knew? We never saw them. Okay, fine. So where are you going? He says, well, I'm in the Navy. I got to get back to San Diego and rejoin my unit. So we said, oh, all right. So we'll take you down to the highway because that's 2 miles from town. And, you know, we'll drop you there. You get a ride right away. Stevens Pass Highway, the check-in shouldn't be too hard. So we did that. Didn't think anything else about it. Went and got the truck from Lou, went and cut some firewood, left the cord in there, dropped the firewood at home, dropped the truck with Lou, we're gonna go back and stack the firewood, okay? And we're driving up this road, it's 5 miles from town, and about 1.5 miles up the road, I keep seeing this thing over in the woods, like flickering, these lights. And I'm like, Chip, dude, turn the pickup around. Something's going on in the woods. So we turn around and he can see it too, and it's the kind of thing, it's kind of like when you're at a rock concert and people are shooting out flash bulbs because you look at that one and it flashes over here, and you look there and it flashes over here, and you're just doing this, and it's like, what is that? It's a nice level stretch of woods, maybe 1/4 mile long. And so we get out of the pickup and we go over and we look, and it's fish. What had happened was the river had come up and had flooded under the culvert, and the fish had gone up in there, and then the river dropped and they were trapped. So we said, I know what's for dinner tonight. And just at that moment, an orange pickup came around the curve and hit the brakes and stopped right behind our pickup. And I realized, oh, there's a logo on that truck. What does that say? Oh yeah, Fish and Wildlife. And these 2 big guys get out, and they have uniforms on, and they come over to us and they say, hey, you guys aren't trying to take any of those fish, are you? And we said, no. We were trying to figure out how to get them back to the river so they could get out of here. And they said, no. You can't touch any of those fish. Those fish are here, and they're going to stay here, they're going to die, and they're going to feed the trees. This is how the forest lives, okay? And it's the way of nature. And I wanted to say, well, is the culvert the way of nature? But I restrained myself. So he said, you guys need to move on. So we got in the pickup and we left. But we were bummed, man, because we had fish dinner. So we waited a while, and then we got in the pickup, left the cabin, went to town, went to Lou's house, and said, hey Lou, have you got a dip net? And Lou said, I didn't know you boys was fishermen. Where are you fishing? You need a dip net. And I didn't have an answer ready because I hadn't thought ahead. So I said, well, I'd really rather not say if you don't mind. And he looked at me real hard. And he said, you boys stay right there. And he left the room. And he came back in with a nice long handled dip net. And he said, now looky here. If you get caught, this ain't my dip net. Then he let me have it. And he followed us out to the pickup. And we got in the pickup and he said, now wait a minute. There's one more thing. I got 4 kids in the freezer. Good luck. So we went back up to the woods where the fish were. And it's dusk. And we're paranoid because we're afraid the Fish and Wildlife people are going to come and bust us. Okay, so Chip gets in the water and he starts kind of just like doing this, herding them towards me. And I'm there with the dip net next to the pickup. And as soon as they come up close, I throw them in the pickup. And we're doing this thing and we're looking for the Fish and Wildlife guys and we're chasing around and we sort of got into a rhythm, we sort of got good at it. And we're throwing fish in there and we're throwing fish in there and I realized, well, we got a lot of fish in there. And I look in the back of the pickup and there's like 100 fish in there. So I was like, okay, we got Lou covered, let's get out of here. So we throw a tarp over the fish and we jump in the pickup and we drive to town. We go to Lou's house and we pound on the door and Lou comes and he looks at the fish and he takes like 3 or 4 dozen. Which leaves us with like 50 or 60 or 70 fish. A lot of fish. So we go to Jackie's and Jackie doesn't have a freezer, so she can only take 4 or 5. And then we're like, what the hell are we going to do with these fish? And Jackie says, look, there's no jobs in this town. There's no economy here. Everybody in this town is either on a pension or welfare or unemployment. Let me make some calls. So she got on the phone and she told us, go down the street, the red house, knock on the door, they want some fish. We did that, we came back. She told us another one. We found homes for all those fish. Okay? And then we jumped in the pickup and we went up to the cabin and fired up the wood stove and cooked up 4 fish. And I think between the 4 of us, we ate 2 of them that night. And these were big guys. These were good sized fish. So after that, the vibe was different in town. We'd go into town and people would say hello, and you'd run into somebody at the grocery store and they want to have a conversation with you. And it was great. You know, you could go to the tavern and sit down and have a beer, and somebody come over and start talking to you. It was terrific. And we met all these people, and it was great. We even got invited to, well, that's a different story. Okay, so we're laying in firewood, and the snow's getting worse and worse, and it's getting harder and harder to even get out of the driveway. And we hear in town that there's been some cabins broken into up near us. Somebody's breaking into cabins. And we're like, oh, that's not good. Because sooner or later, somebody's going to think it's us. And it wasn't us. No, seriously, it wasn't us. So, we're thinking about that. And one day, along about sundown, which we're in the mountains, sundown's at 3. So, along about sundown, there's all this ruckus out in front from the dogs. We had some dogs, and they were just going wild. And we go out there, and here's these 2 teenage girls standing there like this, surrounded by dogs. And they had like ski clothes on. They had good boots, and it's like, what are you guys doing here? And they didn't want to tell us at first, but they finally came clean that they were runaways from Seattle, and they were the ones who've been breaking into the cabins. So, and they said, we don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. And it's like, well, we'll drive you to town. No, we can't go to town. We can't go to town. All right, come in. Well, we'd long since run out of fish. And they were hungry, so we had to feed them. And now we're thinking, great. We got 2 teenage girls. There's 4 hippies living in the woods, harboring 2 teenage girl runaways. What could possibly go wrong? So we're contemplating, what are we going to do with these girls? We can't keep them here. We can't send them away. What are we going to do? And all of a sudden, the dogs are making a big ruckus out there. And we go out, and it's full dark now, so we have to get lanterns to go out. And we go out, and here's Al, the Navy guy. And we're like, dude, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, my commanding officer got into this thing with him, and I couldn't take it. I went AWOL. So, you know, it's the 60s. It's like, all right, well, you know, come on in. And of course, he's hungry, so we have to feed him. He says, I got to get up to Garland because my brother was in the Navy and he'll know what to do. And it's like, okay. Well, he gets to talking to these 2 girls about Garland and telling them how cool it is, and everybody's got their own cabin, and there's plenty of food, and blah, blah, and yada, yada. And pretty soon these girls are like, hey, we want to go with him. And we're like, well, okay. So, next morning we get up, and we feed everybody, and we put them in the pickup, and we take them up as far as the road is plowed. And they've still got like 4 or 5 miles to go to get to Garland Mineral Springs, and there's like a couple feet of snow. And we're like, are you sure you want to do this? And they're like, yeah. Okay, all right. And we go back to the cabin. So the very next day, we get word that the train is derailed. About 10 or 15 miles up the road, up the Stevens Pass Road. Well, we got to go look at that, right? So we jump in the pickup and we get directions to where you have to go because it's kind of, you have to find this road and go down it and like that. So we do that, and sure enough, you come around this corner on the road and the train is right there. The derailed cars, there's like 15, 20 cars off the tracks, and 6 or 8 of them are laying on their sides, and 2 of them are broken open, right by where you come out. And we look, and one of them is a refrigerator car with frozen food in it. And the other one has 50-pound sacks of potatoes, and we're like, oh. There's a Great Northern truck there, and all of a sudden, the guy pops out of this wreckage and comes over and says, hey, you're on railroad property, you can't be down here. And we're like, oh, we didn't know. And he's like, you didn't see the sign? And we lied. So he says, you got to get out of here. He says, I'm just closing up. I'm leaving too, so I'll follow you out. And we're like, well, aren't you going to get a crew in here to get that food? He's like, no, it's cheaper for the railroad if they just let it rot. Collect the insurance. Okay. So we go up the road, and he follows us up the road, and we go toward town. And he goes up toward wherever he's going, Skycomish or somewhere. And we go to Lou's house. Hey, Lou, can we borrow your truck? He says, what do you got, another red hot fishing hole? And I said, yeah, it's like this. See, there's this. And he says, no, I don't want to know what you're doing. I'm deputy sheriff. I can't know what you're doing. So he takes out the keys and he says, look, this truck is how I feed my family. You lose this truck, I'm screwed. So he said, okay, we won't lose your truck. Well, long story short, we spent several hours loading up that truck. We went to town, we distributed all those groceries. We get back to the cabin, fire up the wood stove, and we had Swanson's Hungry Man dinners for supper. After that, we were rock stars. We'd go to town and draw a crowd, man. We'd pull up at the general store and people would come out of the tavern and come over and talk to us. Shake our hands. Everybody knew our name. It was great. And let me tell you, it was really important that we had good friends in Index, Washington, because it turned out that Al hadn't told us the whole story. He didn't tell us that the actuality was he had escaped from a Navy prison because he had nearly killed his commanding officer. And he got those 2 girls out in the wilderness, and he had a gun. And he shot one of them in the back and nearly killed her. And Chip and I got implicated in his escape from justice. And suddenly, there's a ruckus outside the cabin. And we open the door, and it's the Snohomish County Police, 4 of them. And they come in the cabin, and they say, we were gonna come up here, like we came up here just now, and put the handcuffs on you, and take you to Everett, and grill you real good. But you've got some very good friends in town. And they said, you need to give them a chance. So here's your chance. You have 24 hours to find this guy. We'll be back in 24 hours with the handcuffs. And we said, wait, we don't know where he is. And they said, we're leaving now, goodbye. And they left. And Chip and I got in the pickup. And we went to look for him. And we found him. But hey, that's another story.
So I was originally going to come up here and tell a story about my grandma and my mom, and how my grandma was an immigrant, and how when I was in high school, my mom had a series of small strokes, and how that shaped my life as a person. But as so often happens in life, this morning I woke up and some fucker posted something on Facebook. And it kind of changed my mind a little bit. And so this thing that this I guess, acquaintance, we can call him. It's not someone I'm really close with, not someone I'd really call a friend, but not someone I've deleted off my Facebook friends list yet. Posted was an article, a thought catalog piece titled, "Why I Don't Want to Be Gay Anymore." I'm gonna let that sink in while you look at me, a very loud, a very energetic and colorful gay man. And I think you can see why I would have a very strong reaction of, what the fuck? And so either because I hate myself or because I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, I read the article. The Cliff Notes is this person writing the article, has been out and living as a gay man for, 10 years or so now and is tired of it. Is jaded and lonely and sad and, came out thinking that he would find community, that he'd find brotherhood and intimacy, but instead found hookup culture where everyone's, on their smartphones on Grindr looking for the next person to have sex with, or going to pride parades and getting trashed, and just how he's fed up with it. It made me think about my life and how I have such a vastly different experience as a gay man. I feel like I've had so many loving, close, intimate relationships that I've found through summer camps, through random people I started talking to on the internet, through people I've met at anime conventions. And it made me think this guy has such a sad story to me because I'm not gonna lie, that's the reality for a lot of gay men. They're lonely, they're hurt, they come out of the closet at 18, at 21, at 50 if it takes them that long. And they don't have any role models showing them what a healthy relationship looks like because all we see in the media is gay men having sex and getting drunk. We see queer as folk. And they just don't know what to do with themselves, with this freedom that they feel from coming out, because all of a sudden they're able to be themselves. And I thought, I never had to deal with that. In high school, I had this shirt. It was a blue shirt. It was a blue tie-dye shirt, t-shirt. And I wore it to school. But I didn't just wear this blue tie-dye shirt to school. I covered it in Beanie Babies. Not the full-size Beanie Babies, but the little McDonald's-sized ones. And not just any ones, but because it's a blue tie-dye shirt, ocean-themed ones. And I wore this to public high school. I've been out there ever since. It didn't matter to me to stand out like that and to be different because I had a sense of community. In high school, I was a newspaper kid. I was, part of that group that'd be after school for hours, in a computer lab with no windows, working on getting the paper done so that we could, have it printed by the next week. And that continued into high school, or not in high school, but into college. When I got to college, I was part of the Associated Students. I was a club leader for several different clubs over the years. I volunteered around town. And it made me realize, and thinking about this and kind of stewing on it all day, because I'm still thinking about this article going what, why do you have that? Why, of course you're not going to find community in a gay hookup culture. That's not where there's community. You have to go find community elsewhere. In college, I was, I've done poetry. I taught dance. I dabbled a little in theater. For me, community was always what you did. You go out and you do stuff, and then you find people and you have fun with them, and at the same time, in college, I, dated, I had sex, I, participated in that culture, but it wasn't my culture. My culture was everything else that I did. And it made me realize that, you have to create it for yourself. And, I think about all these people that know me and love me and are part of my communities, because it's not just one community, we're all part of multiple communities. You know, we have our friends, we have our family, we have our work, we have our church, we have, you know, the theater. And we make these communities and we bring people in, and it's something that you go out and do. And it made me realize, like, I want to be that role model. I want to, you know, be that person that people can go and go, yeah, okay, like, that's what a healthy, stable, like, gay relationship can look like. I'm pointing that way because that's my partner right there playing the guitar. And so, like you do when you're all fired up and like thinking about something like this, like, I shared that article on Facebook with my own commentary because I really wanted the person who shared it originally that I saw it from to see it and like see like all of my friends commenting on it going, hey, what this guy's saying in this article, like, no, like, it's not all like that. There's like still plenty of other stuff, and like you're like stereotyping the community and like you're homogenizing the community because like to call it a gay community, like, no, it's huge, it's diverse, there's hundreds of thousands of people, like, it's communities, if anything. And I found out about an hour after I had posted this and like, you know, wrote this wall of text trying to explain like why this was wrong, that the person blocked me on Facebook because apparently it was not receptive to the message I was trying to send, which I guess kind of tells me that, you know, all you can do is lead a horse to water.
So my name's Ethan, and I feel like it's best to start a little bit with like who I am. 27 years old. I'm currently working on my thesis for my master's in fine arts for fiction, which is really what drew me to this and what really drew other people in to like Ethan, you've got to go up and you've got to tell your stories. Like, I only ever read anything off of a page. That's all I do. And another fact is I am married to the weirdest fucking alien I have ever met. And people were like, well, that sounds really unusual. And I'm like, well, if you've known me ever since I was young, it's pretty boilerplate, actually. When I was growing up, I was the one in the family who was the black sheep. I didn't fit in. I had 3 brothers, stepdad, and a mom. Which it's weird that took me so long because she's actually my favorite one. And yes, you can tell everyone in my family that, they will know. But I like really didn't fit in a lot of ways. Like my 3 brothers, they loved to wrestle and fight. I cried really easily. They loved going to the monster truck rallies. I preferred not to freeze my fucking ass off in November, sitting on cold bleachers with foam little things stuck in my ears. God damn. So anyway, but I tried what I could to do. I tried to fit in, and like the first thing I did was I played Little League. And after the first season was over, we drove home. My stepdad was the coach, which kind of explains how I got into the team in the first place. And he pulls me aside and he's like, you were never playing this sport ever again. The entire season, you did not swing the bat once. And I had a defense for this, though. I said, well, like, all these kids are my age, and I know that I'm really bad at throwing the ball. So I'm not going to swing the bat at really bad pitches all the time. I'm just going to wait for ball 4, hit it off the tee, and go to first base, because no one can run after the ball. Apparently, like, that sort of, deep analysis that children are shitty at sports was not welcome. But that was the kind of kid I was. And after a while, I started to think, like, maybe I was adopted. Maybe, like, maybe I'm the changeling little child in my family. And I told my mom this once because I was in a weird place, I suppose. And she laughed, and I said, she was like, no, you're my son, trust me. And it's like, well, like, what proof can you give me? And there's a very knowing look that I know now what it means, but at that age, she just sort of looked at me and was like, I'll tell you when you're older. Which I thought, as a very imaginative kid, I thought what this meant was one day she's going to tell me about how she found me in a field in Nebraska. It was a crashed spaceship. They just pulled me out of the crater. It had nothing to do with the miracle of childbirth. Though, to be fair, if I was told about the miracle of childbirth at that age, also having seen Alien very young, the idea of bursting from another human was not the best evidence. So like these fantasies continued for an incredibly long time. And at a certain point, I just really enjoyed thinking about it. Like I stopped believing it. I was just like, this is just like a really cool thought to have. And I had like these thoughts where like one day the aliens would come down and I would be introduced to my own, my actual parents, and I would be rescued from this hellish place where everybody watches football, and for the hell of it, because I was really imaginative, one of the smaller aliens would punch my not brother in the face. For all of the times that he's accused me of shit I didn't do, like breaking the flatbed off of an old Tonka truck. Talk to me about that later. That's one of my favorite stories of him. We were pretty sure he was actually a pathological liar. Anyway. We were sure he was going to be diagnosed. So, it's no wonder with thoughts like these and continuing thoughts like this that eventually, I started to write stories. And this, again, continued on to where I am now. Only at a certain age, I guess I just sort of fell out of it. And I thought, maybe I was actually maturing for once in my life. That was dead wrong. When I started reading Dostoevsky, I started reading Milton and Sartre because apparently that's the direction I wanted to go in my life. And, in high school and through college, and I felt like I sort of got away from all of that. And that's in college is where I met Danny. Danny, you're absolutely charming. You're handsome. You have just the fucking cutest smile. I'm just trying, I'm overwhelmed by emotions right now. I love the fact that you're currently wearing what you refer to as your peacock pants. And once again, you've blown a hole out in the crotch. I love it. It's so endearing. Please find pants that actually fit though. And so this is the place that I am in now. But back then when I first met him, I'm like, wow, here's somebody who's so kind of opposite to me. At that point, I was a little bit shyer. I don't do this often. And I was shyer, I was quiet. Trust, you can ask Danny on this. I probably didn't say very much on that first night we met. And so I was really excited to meet somebody so new and unique, compared to everybody that I met previously. 2 anniversaries later, we've been married for 2 years now, and I realized that old habits die hard, and I have in fact met and married the strangest creature to ever walk this earth. Now, most of us here eat food, right? Raise your hand if you don't eat food. Danny, raise your hand. Most of us eat food, a meal, every morning. I swear to God, I used to wake up to him just running the blender. This man eats seeds and goo. This man eats seeds and goo. Nothing but flax and water sometimes. Are you eating probiotics by the pound? I'm there's a reason why we have antibiotics. It's to stop people from doing that. And you might be thinking flax, water. At least he exercises. He's being really healthy. No, I don't think so. I'm calling bullshit on that. Don't give him any credit for being human. I just want to say that if it occurs that I end up missing, check his seeds and goo. This Soylent Green eating motherfucker that's probably where I'm at. He works at Terra Organica, so that's no surprise that he's so healthy. Every Wednesday he works 12-hour shifts. And you would imagine during a 12-hour shift when you have your break, you would try to relax, decompress, do as little as possible, like a normal person. Danny goes for 4-mile runs every single time. Well, maybe not every single time. Sometimes he walks. And he remains on his feet, and he's I don't know why you have so many pain problems even. I'm it's because I'm a person. And like, I didn't even fail to mention that when I met him, I was really impressed by the fact that he had a double degree, one in English literature and one in kinesiology. But now I'm really suspect about that kinesiology one. I think there's nothing more interesting to any sort of alien out there than exactly how the human body works. He's probably over there taking notes for like the greatest dissertation the universe has ever seen, and he's going to take it back and he's going to be like awarded the Nobel Prize for aliens, I guess. And I think the ultimate proof that I have for Danny being an alien. And like, I know a lot of people. I know people in general, and I know that they can be really judgy. Like, I've grown up queer. I've grown up wanting to pursue an English major. That was probably the worst part of those two. And I just like, and I pretty much grew up in a family where everybody made fun of me for the things I did, except skateboarding, because skateboarding's cool. And so I expected, you know, there's certain things in my life that I expected him to be really judgy about. But he's like the best listener I know. Like when, like, this is a little bit intimate, but at one point, you know, in our relationship, he's like, well, what are you into? And I could not say anything except some really weird shit, all right? And like, but he was, I don't know, he sort of insistent, and I just sort of felt comfortable, and eventually I told him, and he's sort of like embraced that, and I couldn't be happier for that sort of thing. When we moved to New Hampshire, he worked 7 days a week for almost 2 years straight. How many days off did you have, Danny, that entire time for 2 years? 3? And those were very far and few between. And he did that because he was with me and he was supporting my MFA at the University of New Hampshire. And of course it seems weird that like, how can anybody work this much without complaint? And for a while, I believed that there was another thing. It was like, obviously, he's not human. Like, you know, socialists died and spilled their blood so we could have a weekend, but here he is. But he did all this for me, and I know that I probably wouldn't have done the same for him. And, I'm being absolutely honest here. And this might sound corny, and it probably is, so fuck you. But when I look at him, when I look in his eyes, all that like sense of wonder about space and shit that I really liked as a kid, I don't know, I just sort of, I feel it, and I feel inspired to write those sorts of stories again. I'm like, all that wonder that was seeped out of me through SART, God, it's returned, and so, of course, I married this weird alien. What kind of person would I be if I didn't?